Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Shashwati Shah, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Sikkim University. Today we'll be talking about reading new literature in English, and the module is on literature and surveillance in cyberspace. The content of the module has been written by Mr. Rinon Kundu, Senior Research Fellow, Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. In this module, we'll start by defining the terms like cyberspace, cyber literature, surveillance, and then we'll gradually move on to understand how surveillance exists and the relationship between all these three terms, that is cyberspace, cyber literature, and surveillance, because all these are intrinsically related. Surveillance studies have become an academic field in its own right within the last 15 years. Although the majority of publications approach the issue from a perspective within social sciences, film studies especially have since their infancy articulated an ongoing fascination with voyeurism, touching on many of the core issues of surveillance. However, it is only within recent years when visual art exhibitions and reality TV programs began responding on a larger scale to the increasing pervasiveness of surveillance technology in our everyday lives in Western societies. Cultural studies has taken a serious interest in the issues of surveillance. Nonetheless, there is still a significant need for inquiry into the cultural and aesthetic implications of the increased dominance of surveillance in a larger historical perspective and its relation with cyber literature. Understanding the concept of surveillance. After Snowden, Rethinking the Impact of Surveillance by Bowman et al. Takes Edward Snowden disclosure as a watershed point in the history of the theoretical understanding of the concept of surveillance. If we look back, 9/11 seems like a transformative trigger event for surveillance, an axis around which everything changed, and more like an opportunity for the confirmation and strengthening of existing trends, particularly a growing anxiety amongst intelligence agencies that the internet both supplied them with an amazing new source of data, much of it freely given by participants on social media, but also presented a potential unlimited power in terms of controlling and surveilling the mass. As you know, students, information is always out there on internet. Because of internet, you can always collect and gather as much information as you want to. But there is another side of it as well. There is a constant surveillance at work of which we might not be aware of. Have you ever tried searching something on internet and the next day you open an app, you will see you get suggestions of similar links and similar sites which they ask you that you may want to visit, which means there is some big other somewhere watching every move of yours on the internet. They are recording it and reminding you of the things that you have done sometimes before. Bowman et al. Discuss what it is at stake as a result of Snowden revelations, noting how the idea of digital panopticism has changed post-Snowden and taken its departure from all the discussions surrounding the system of surveillance that existed prior to the coming of Snowden. The article takes off from the Edward Snowden crisis of 2013, which spills the beams of mass surveillance system as well as explores the consequences of violation of democratic principles and legal rights. Not only the state operators, that is US surveillance programs, surveillance systems from UK to Sweden, France to Germany, but the private providers from Google to Apple, Microsoft to Facebook, and telecom giants also collect data which consist both content and meta-content, which tells the story of one individual. This imperative to collect it all has focused government of United States attention squarely on the private sector, which owns and operates most of cyberspace. States began to apply pressure on companies to act as a proxy for government controls, policing their own networks for content and deemed illegal, suspicious, or a threat to national security. It is imperative to say that with the Snowden disclosures, the differentiation between citizen and non-citizen is also brought into question. If we explore the different surveillance systems, both governmental and non-governmental, we will see the relationship between the watcher and the watched. Using George Orwell's interpretation of a surveillance society through dystopian surveillance mechanism, as it is envisioned in his novel 1984, we can clearly perceive the effects of surveillance in society. George Orwell was heavily influenced by the concept of panopticon, an architectural plan by Jeremy Bentham, and later social theory by Michel Foucault. Now, I hope you have an idea of what panopticon is. Panopticon is a design of an institutional building put forward by the social theorist and philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century. It is a structure of cells where you put convex, which will be circular in structure, and in the middle will be a tower. It is saying, according to the plan actually, that on the top of the tower there will be one soldier standing who will look after all the prisoners in the cells. Now it is mortally impossible for that one soldier or one policeman standing on top of the tower to look after each of these convicts. But the convicts will not know whom he is watching. Therefore, all of them will have a fear in the mind of being watched, and therefore they will become the self-regulated individual, and they will not dare do anything that is against the rules of the place. The purpose of incorporating the metaphor of Foucault's panopticon to Roy Bowen's post-panopticism is to describe the modern society as a post-panoptic society and to establish the metamorphosis of representative democracies into totalitarian regime in the name of protection, which further destabilizes the balance between privacy, liberty, and security. We have to understand the need for right balance between national security and individuals' right to privacy. This individual's right to privacy is something that has been respected to an extent by certain search engines like DuckDuckGo, who tries to keep whatever is searched on that engine secret and not disclosing it later, like many other search engine does, giving you links and pop-ups depending on what you have searched for some time in those sites. With the understanding of the canon of surveillance studies and critical security studies, we will now turn towards the fuzzing of national borders, complicated and ever-changing cartographies, and lines of control and enforcement, smudging of lines between national security and transnational surveillance, nationals and foreigners, as well as how the private will of an individual is curbed by a constant threat of an invisible gaze. We have to keep in mind the global political economy of surveillance and how multiple states like Germany, France, Poland, Sweden, and Netherlands have become, following the aftershock of Snowden incident, potential sites of resistance against big state, that is United States monopoly in collecting big data, collocation of social media, mobile connectivity, and cloud computing. With a particular focus on Snowden's exposure of NSA surveillance operation in Brazil, we can see a number of major international fallouts after Snowden leaks. For example, the Brazilian blowout, European Union snubbing of US surveillance, resistance from a number of left-leaning Latin American countries, as well as formation of digitized geopolitics like the creation of European data cloud, Chinese Great Firewall, Iranian Halal Internet. We can define cyberspace as a single domain equal to land, sea, air and space, which to control every state has to build up a digital fortress and cyber defenses, leading to the imperative to dominate and rule this domain, to develop offensive capabilities to fight and win wars within cyberspace and to hold technological sovereignty. The imperatives of mass surveillance and preparations for cyber warfare across the globe have reoriented the defense industrial base and industrial coalitions. Following the Snowden storm, the essay discusses how mass surveillance of the internet by intelligence agencies is corrosive of online privacy and threatens to undermine privacy law, human rights law, and right of data protection. It is interesting to explore how the power relations are intersecting each other and blurring thereafter, with a particular stress on the concept of cyber sovereignty and digital subject. It ventures into the discussion how mass surveillance and digital espionage and resistance towards it increasingly becomes an integral part of everyday life. Bringing Kafka into the scene, we can tease out how people through electronic surveillance over innocent metadata are subjected to anything nearly as extreme as Joseph K. in the trial. The words of the attorney and author John W. Whitehead about the US National Security Agency scandal in an article titled Kafka's America is worth quoting in this context. I quote, "We now live in a society in which a person can be accused of any number of crimes without knowing what exactly he has done. He might be apprehended in the middle of the night by a roving band of SWAT police. He might find himself on a no-fly list, unable to travel for reasons undisclosed. He might have his phones or internet tapped based upon a secret order handed down by a secret court with no recourse to discover why he was targeted." Indeed, this is Kafka's nightmare, and it is slowly becoming America's reality. Social networking and social life have to be re-narrated in the encounter with everyday surveillance. It is apparent that social selves are, in a sense, co-produced with the surveillance state. The Bangladeshi American artist Hassan M. Ilahi has produced a digital installation that poignantly critiques the co-production of the self through surveillance. After he was detained in 2002 and informed that he was on a terrorist watch list, he produced an installation that recorded all of his daily activities and whereabouts titled "Hiding in Plain Sight." We know that being held at an airport, asking you to come out of the usual line, being interrogated, questioned more and more about your identity is very common. It is something that might affect any one of us. This is something that has affected this Bangladeshi artist M. Ilahi. What he did as a result of it is that he created this site and started uploading picture every minute of his whereabouts, just to show to the world where he is and what he is doing, so that no more queries about what he is doing, where he lives, what he eats can be questioned. So much so that he also has pictures of his most intimate spaces uploaded on that site. This is kind of answering to the extreme surveillance that is somewhere looking at us from some angle. Ilahi's stance is an answer to the kind of extreme surveillance that human beings are subjected to in the modern world. Commenting on this work of surveillance, he noted that the visitor to his site included the CIA and the Pentagon. So I am looking at who is looking at me. This is something like returning the gaze. Instead of being gazed at, you know who is gazing at you. So surveillance is basically the recording of an activity, typically by a participant in the activity, by way of small variable or portable personal technologies. Now coming to the concept of new English literature, and we will now try to link it with the concept of surveillance and cyberspace. The term new English literature refers to the Anglophone literatures of Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, Oceania, and Canada. The field has direct overlaps with English studies, for instance by including Black and Asian British literature as well as travel writing via Canadian literature. It is also so closely linked to the field of North American studies. A special focus in the Augsburg New English literature. The label of new literature includes the literary production of a geographically and culturally vast and non-contiguous area that includes the former British colonies. For example, from Canada to Australia, from Singapore to Pakistan and India. Some critics debate whether or not to include the USA in this area, although their independence from Britain in the 18th century and the position of the world power that they have enjoyed have led many to exclude them. The rapid expansion of digital networking and especially the internet over the past 2 decades has been a boon for the many informational intensive activities that facilitate and increasingly constitute contemporary social, economic, political and cultural life. Access to information and the means to produce information have grown dramatically, enabling both individual empowerment and democratic participation. Digital mediation is transforming the design, production, marketing, distribution and consumption of a widening array of goods and services. Internet provides a platform for active involvement in campaigns, groups, movements and political activism, allows individuals to disseminate the fruit of their creation to the world at virtually no cost and enables the instantaneous search of volumes of data. Contemporary society has become an information society and hence it makes sense to interpret various changes in the cultural sphere. Connections between computer technology and literature are one aspect of the complicated global set of problems in tackling the adaptation of text with the media. The next subheading is Literature in Cyberspace, a study. The focus should be on what happens with literary text in cyberspace, how they adapt to the environment, and it examines the form of cyber literature. The most comprehensive definition of cyber literature derives from the concept of digital literature, that is, literature created on the computer and presented by means of the computer. Trying to narrow the concept of cyber literature, it can be characterized by certain computer-specific qualities: multilinearity, lexius, which is blocks of text connected with various hypertext links, joined by links, linking a written text with multimedia, interactivity, etc. It is interesting to note that many recent books in this literature do not tend to see cyber surveillance as a separate issue or concern, at least if judged by the crude measure of chapter headings and index references. Digitally mediated surveillance is an increasingly prevalent but still largely invisible aspect of daily life. As we work, play, and negotiate public and private spaces, online and off, we produce a growing stream of personal digital data of internet to unseen others. CCTV cameras hosted by private and public actors survey and record our movements in public space as well as in workplace. Corporate interests track our behavior as we navigate both social and transactional cyberspaces, determining our digital doubles and packaging users as commodities for sale to the highest bidder. Governments continue to collect personal information online with unclear guidelines for retention and use, while law enforcement increasingly use internet technology to monitor not only criminals but activists and political dissidents as well, with worrisome implication for democracy. Zainab Tufekci, in his essay titled "Is the Internet Good or Bad?" portrays our helpless condition in such a digital world, which he calls it as fragmented media landscape. In other words, we are living in the world of surveillance where each of our movements or steps are recorded or watched out by the internet and telecommunication agencies monitored by the government. So the main question he hits in this essay is the question of privacy and freedom of living in the digital environment. The right to privacy, that is human right, is the same as a right to speech, which is totally gone out of the society. Another issue he states is that how digital communication has become a form of organization for promoting the public events such as public protests with the help of new technology. A small street movement is getting expanded in its horizon with a fraction of a second, and thereby getting its influence and support from all over the world. Another important issue of this essay is the use of digital media of the political organization for promoting their political campaign and the different companies for selling their products. So we know all of this. We have seen how protests were organized over the internet. Facebook plays a very important role in it, and we are very aware of it, how these spaces provide a platform where people can voice out their opinions, gather support from people all across the world, and therefore launch a protest. There is one side to it. The other side is that the promotion that the marketing agencies are doing day in and day out. The other side is that we are constantly under watch. We are being watched every moment. There is the big other who knows whatever we are doing over the internet space. What I enjoy in a narrative is not directly its content or even its structure, but rather the aberrations I impose upon the fine surface. I read on, I skip, I look up, I deepen again. This is what literary critic Roland Barthes said in his short work, The Pleasure of the Text. The palpability of a book is very important for few readers among us. We like to touch the book, hold it, smell it, and it gives us a pleasure of a different kind. Of course, in case of e-text, we lose this. But on the other side, we also know that we get access to so many books from across the world, so many types of literature that is being produced from every corner of the world is presented over the internet, and we have access to it. This literature that we get over the internet is something that is to stay there forever until and unless it is removed by the person who has put there. Books are not there forever. Books get stained, they are too heavy, have missing pages, are long and thick or short and thin. Books have physical personalities. Here we are not comparing between books and cyber literature. They are two different things, but it is through internet that we get access to a large number of books. Cyber literature could serve as an umbrella term, which could tentatively be divided in three. Number one, all literary texts available on the internet. This term covers prose or poetry texts available at the home pages of professional writers, anthologies of prose and poetry published and digitized, collections of classical texts, online literary magazines, etc. Number two, non-professional literary texts available at the internet, which inclusion in literary analysis expands the boundaries of traditional literature. Here the net functions first and foremost as an independent place of publication. The term would cover home pages of amateur writers, groups of unrecognized young authors, and their portals. Here we might also include peripheries of literature such as fan fictions, or blogs describing people's daily life, also text-based role-playing games and collective online novels. Number 3, hypertext literature and cybertext. This would include literary texts of more complex structure which exploit various hypertext solutions but also integrate multimedia cybertext. Cyber literature constitutes only a part of a wider set of problems in the context of general technological progress in the society and is turning into a society of communication and information. Here, we are also dealing with the multitude of possibilities characteristic of postmodernist cultural scene, the expansion of the concept of literature and the emergence of new literary forms. Cyber literature is a result of this postmodernist expansion, where the concept of literature is broadened, incorporating former peripheries. Cyber literature has also added new forms to the usual books in codex binding in the form of a multimedia artifact, which would be a symbiosis of literature, visual arts, music. Computer as a medium serves two functions here. Firstly, it enables to present complicated nonlinear text structures or to program entirely new works of art. Secondly, the computer serves to democratize literature. In the virtual space, modernist elite literature is replaced by literature for common people, ranging from ordinary amateur literature to specific types of fan fiction. Here, it is possible to witness the blurring of boundaries between literature and folklore and perhaps their possible convergence. Cyber literature has a number of positive aspects. It has helped to democratize knowledge. It has helped in bringing books to the common people. It has made knowledge worldwide. But we also know the kind of surveillance that we are subjected to on an everyday basis. In this module, we have learned about cyber literature, cyberspace, and surveillance, the connection between each of them and how they are linked. I hope you enjoyed the module and will try to find out more about all these terms. Thank you.